My parents forced us to live in 1954. If I broke character, I was locked in the root cellar. Before we continue this story, let us know which city or country you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave a like on the video. It started when I was 6 years old, on a Tuesday afternoon in July. I was weeding the front garden, kneeling in the dirt in my starched cotton dress, sweating through the heavy fabric. A car drove past our farmhouse, a rare occurrence on our isolated dirt road. The windows were down, and for 3 glorious seconds, I heard music. It wasn't the hymns Mother played on the piano. It wasn't the crackly, looped recordings of The Shadow that Dad played on the wireless. It was a thumping, bass-heavy pop song from the early 2000s. I didn't know the words, just the rhythm. It vibrated in my chest, something primal and exciting. Without thinking, I started to hum it. I bobbed my head to the phantom beat while pulling a dandelion. My mother froze. She was standing on the porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl. The rhythmic snap-plink of the peas stopped instantly. She dropped the bowl. Peas scattered across the wooden planks like green marbles. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She walked down the porch steps with a terrifying, silent grace. She grabbed my upper arm, her fingers digging into my flesh like talons, and dragged me into the kitchen. She forced my head over the farmhouse sink and scrubbed my mouth with lye soap until my gums bled and the taste of harsh chemicals coated my throat. "We do not bring the noise into the sanctuary, Clara," she whispered, her eyes wide and unblinking. "The noise is the devil. The noise is what rots the world." You see, my parents didn't just like the 1950s. They were obsessed with the fanatical belief that American society had peaked in 1954. They believed the modern world, the noise, as they called it, was a toxic environment that poisoned children's souls. So they decided to opt out completely. We lived in a farmhouse in rural Nebraska, miles from the nearest town. But it wasn't just a house. It was a meticulously constructed time capsule. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every article of clothing, and every book was authentically from or before 1954. We had an icebox that required blocks of ice, not a refrigerator. We had a coal furnace that Dad stoked manually. We had no television, no computer, no phones. My brother, Thomas, and I were raised as the pure ones. We were their experiment, their masterpiece. Our lives were governed by a schedule that felt less like a family routine and more like a military operation. Mornings began at 5:30 a.m. sharp, not with an alarm clock, but with Mother ringing a small brass bell in the hallway. The sound was sharp and piercing, pulling us from sleep instantly. I had to wash my face with cold water from a pitcher because the plumbing was too loud and too modern for the morning hours. Dressing was a torture all its own. I wore scratchy wool skirts, layers of stiff petticoats that chafed my legs raw, and heavy leather shoes that pinched my toes. Thomas wore trousers held up by suspenders and button-down shirts that had to be starched and ironed until they could stand up on their own. We looked like dolls, stiff and uncomfortable, posed in a museum exhibit. Breakfast was oatmeal or eggs, cooked on a wood-burning stove that filled the kitchen with smoke if the wind blew the wrong way. We had to sit with our backs perfectly straight, linen napkins in our laps, chewing silently. Conversation was strictly monitored. We were only allowed to discuss wholesome topics, the weather, our chores, or the scripture readings Dad selected. Language was a minefield. If we used a word that felt even slightly modern, like cool, okay, or weird, we were sent to the correction corner. This was a 3-legged stool facing the corner of the dining room. You had to sit there, staring at the floral wallpaper, for an hour per syllable of the offending word. But the correction corner was the light punishment. The heavy punishment was the root cellar. It was a hole dug into the earth under the pantry, accessible only by a heavy trapdoor. It smelled of rot, damp earth, and old potatoes. It was pitch black and crawling with spiders. If we showed modern defiance, which could be anything from slumping in our chairs to asking why we couldn't go to school like the children in the books. We were locked down there, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for the entire night. "We are saving you," Dad would say through the floorboards as I huddled in the dark, hugging my knees. "The world out there is on fire. Here, you are safe. Here, you are pure." We were homeschooled, naturally, but we didn't use modern curriculums. We used textbooks from the 1940s and 50s that Dad had scavenged from estate sales. I learned geography that was decades out of date. I thought the Soviet Union was a terrifying, looming threat that could invade at any moment. I thought polio was a daily risk. I learned math with a slide rule and wrote with a fountain pen that stained my fingers blue. But the worst part wasn't the isolation or the fear. It was the society. My parents were part of a niche community called the Restoration Society. These were other fanatics who believed in returning to the Golden Age. Once a month, members of the society would come to visit our farm. These visits were performances. The guests would park their modern cars behind the barn to preserve the aesthetic and enter our house dressed in vintage finery, furs, fedoras, pearls. They would sit in our parlor, drinking tea from fine china, and watch Thomas and me perform. We were treated like zoo animals. We had to recite poetry. We had to play the piano. We had to demonstrate our manners. "Look at them," a woman named Mrs. Halloway would coo, touching my braid with her gloved hand. "So untainted. No screens in their eyes. No slang on their tongues. It's miraculous, Martha." "It's hard work," Mother would say, preening like a peacock. "But the fruit is worth the labor." They would grill us with questions to test our purity. "Clara, what is the proper way to address a gentleman?" "Thomas, demonstrate the foxtrot." If we performed well, Dad would beam and give us a nickel, an actual 1954 nickel, telling us to save it for the candy store, which was just a jar of rock candy in the pantry. If we faltered, the guests would leave early, and the atmosphere in the house would curdle into rage. When I was 12 and Thomas was 14, the cracks began to show. Thomas remembered a little bit of the before time. He had been 4 when the project started. I had been 2. He had vague, dreamlike memories of cartoons and supermarkets. He started whispering to me at night through the ventilation grate between our bedrooms. "Clara," he'd whisper. "I saw a plane today, a jet. It left a white line in the sky." "Don't look at them," I'd whisper back, terrified. "Mother says the chemtrails make you sick. She says they drop sin from the sky." "It's not poison," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's people. Traveling. Going places. Dad says the world is burning, but the people in the delivery trucks look happy. They wear blue jeans. They listen to music." One day, Thomas found a piece of trash in the ditch by the road. It was a Doritos bag. Bright red, shiny plastic. To us, it looked like an alien artifact. He hid it under his mattress. At night, he would take it out and just stare at the neon colors, the bold font, the expiration date. Mar 2018. "Look at the date, Clara," he showed me one night. 2018. Dad says it's 1954, but this bag says 2018. This bag is from the future. Or, we are in the future. "Maybe a demon dropped it," I said, trembling. "No," Thomas said, his eyes hard. "It's from now. We're in the now. They're lying to us." Thomas got careless. He started leaving his bed unmade. He started humming modern tunes he heard from the trucks. Dad caught him with the Doritos bag on a Tuesday inspection. The rage that exploded in that house was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Dad didn't just yell. He preached. He held the bag up like it was a severed head, shaking it in Thomas's face. "Filth!" he screamed. "Plastic poison. You bring this into our sanctuary? You invite the decay into your bed?" He dragged Thomas to the barn. I heard the strap. I heard Thomas screaming. I hid in my closet, surrounded by my wool coats, covering my ears, reciting the presidents of the United States up to Eisenhower to try and block it out. When Thomas came back, he was silent. He walked with a limp. He didn't look at me. He went to the correction corner and sat there for 6 hours without moving. But that night, he whispered through the vent again. "I'm going to run, Clara." "No," I begged. "The wolves, the criminals. You know what Dad says about the cities. They'll kill you." "Dad is a liar," Thomas said. "I'm going to run, and I'm going to come back for you." 2 days later, he tried. He waited until Dad was in the fields and Mom was canning peaches. He bolted down the driveway, his suspenders flapping against his back. He made it to the main road. He was flagging down a car, a blue sedan. I watched from the attic window, my heart in my throat. The car slowed down. Thomas was talking to the driver. He was pointing at the house, waving his arms. Then Dad's truck roared out of the barn, an old 1950 Ford F-100. Dad cut across the pasture, dirt flying. He pulled up alongside the sedan. I saw Dad get out. He was wearing his overalls and holding a pitchfork. Not threateningly, but just holding it like a farmer. He talked to the driver. He laughed. He pointed to Thomas and tapped his own head, making the crazy gesture. The driver nodded, looked at Thomas with pity, and drove away. Thomas stood there, defeated, shrinking into himself. Dad grabbed him by the collar and threw him into the truck. When they got back, Dad nailed the windows on the second floor shut. "For your safety," Mother said. "The world is trying to steal you. We must fortify." That was the turning point. The project became a prison. We were 16 and 14 now. Dad became paranoid. He started patrolling the property line with a shotgun at night. He installed barbed wire on the fences. "Looters," he told us. "They want our water. They want our purity." But the cracks in their facade were getting bigger, and I was getting smarter. One afternoon, I was cleaning the hallway outside the forbidden room, Dad's office in the barn. Usually it was padlocked, but today the padlock was hanging open. Dad was in the fields. Mom was napping. I knew the punishment for entering the forbidden room was days in the cellar. But curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when you're starving for truth. I pushed the door open. I expected to see religious texts, or maybe more antiques. Instead, I saw a glowing blue light. Computer monitors, modern ones, curved high-definition screens humming with power. There was a tower with LED lights. There was a smartphone sitting on the desk charging. I walked into the room, my leather shoes silent on the concrete floor. On the screens were video feeds. Our house. There were cameras hidden everywhere. In the kitchen, in the parlor, even in the hallway. I saw a live feed of Mom sleeping on the sofa. I saw a feed of the empty kitchen. And on the other monitor, a website. I scrolled, my hands shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. There were videos, hundreds of them. Clara recites frost. Thomas churns butter. Discipline day in the sanctuary. There were comments. User 55. So wholesome. Wish I could raise my kids like this. Trad wife life. The dedication is inspiring. Donated $50. Watcher. 9. Are those kids okay? They look terrified. They were selling us. We weren't just a social experiment. We were a reality show. A business. The society visits weren't inspections. They were premium meet and greets for top-tier donors. My entire life, the scratchy clothes, the lye soap, the fear, it was all content. It was a grift. I heard the barn door creak. I scrambled out of the office, shut the door, and fumbled with the padlock to make it look locked. I grabbed my broom and started sweeping furiously. Dad walked in, looked at me, then at the lock. He narrowed his eyes, but said nothing. I ran to the house. I needed to tell Thomas. But Thomas was already in trouble. I found him in his room, curled up in a ball on the bed. He was sweating profusely, his skin gray and clammy. "It hurts," he groaned, clutching his right side. "Clara, it feels like a knife." I touched his forehead. He was burning up. "I'll get Mother." "No," he wheezed. "She'll just give me the oil. I need a doctor." I ran to get Mother anyway. She came in, wiped her hands on her apron, and felt his head. "A fever," she declared. "He has a blockage of the humors. We need to administer a mustard plaster and castor oil." "Mother," I said, my voice trembling. "It's his side. I think it's his appendix. I read about it in the encyclopedia." "Nonsense," she snapped. "It's rebellion manifesting as sickness. He needs to be purged." They force-fed him castor oil. They plastered his chest with burning mustard paste. Thomas screamed all night. By morning, he was unconscious. His belly was hard as a rock. "He's dying," I told Dad at breakfast. I didn't care about the rules anymore. "If you don't take him to a hospital, you're murdering him." Dad stood up and backhanded me. I tasted blood. "Do not speak of death in this house. We are praying. The Lord will decide." "The Lord gave us hospitals," I screamed back. He grabbed me by the hair, dragged me to the cellar, and threw me down the stairs. "You stay there until you learn to trust your father," he spat. The door slammed. The lock clicked. Darkness. I sat in the dirt, crying. I could hear Thomas moaning through the floorboards above me. I knew I had to get out. Not for me. For him. The cellar had a coal chute. It had been welded shut years ago, but the metal was rusty. I found a loose brick in the wall and started pounding on the latch. Clang, clang, clang. My hands bled. Dust filled my lungs. I hit the latch one last time with all my strength. It snapped. I crawled up the chute, scraping my knees and tearing my dress. I tumbled onto the grass. The sun was blinding. I ran to the barn, to the forbidden room. I smashed the window with a rock and climbed in. The monitors were on. I saw the feed of Thomas's room. He wasn't moving. Mom was sitting by his bed, reading a Bible, ignoring his labored breathing. I grabbed the smartphone on the desk. It was passcode locked. I tried 1954. It unlocked. I dialed 911. "Emergency. What is your location?" "I don't know the address," I screamed. "The farm with the big red barn. My brother is dying. We're the timekeepers. Please." "We're tracing the call," the dispatcher said. "Units are rolling. Are you safe?" "No," I said. "My dad has a shotgun." The door burst open. Dad stood there. He wasn't holding a shotgun. He was holding the pitchfork. His face was purple with rage. "You devil," he whispered. "You traitor." I held the phone up. "The police are coming. I told them everything. I told them about the website." He lunged at me. I scrambled under the desk. He jabbed the pitchfork at me, the tines sparking against the concrete. "Drop the phone," he screamed. "Sir!" The dispatcher's voice came tinny through the speaker. "Sir, step away from the child." Dad grabbed the computer tower and ripped it from the wall. He threw it at me. It crashed onto the desk, shielding me. Then we heard it. Sirens. Real, modern electronic sirens. Dad froze. He looked at the window. He looked back at me. His eyes shifted from rage to fear. He dropped the pitchfork and ran out of the barn. I crawled out and ran to the driveway. 2 police cruisers tore up the dirt road, dust billowing behind them. They looked like spaceships to me. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. "He's in the house," I yelled, raising my hands. "My brother is in the upstairs bedroom. He needs an ambulance." They kicked the front door in. I heard Mom screaming about her authentic linoleum. Then paramedics rushed in. 10 minutes later, they brought Thomas out. He was conscious, but barely. They loaded him into the ambulance. Then came Mom and Dad, handcuffed. Without his bluster, Dad just looked like a crazy man in overalls. An officer walked over to me. She was a woman wearing pants. She looked like a superhero. "Are you Clara?" she asked gently. "You did good, kid. You saved his life." "Is it 2025? I asked her, looking at the fake farmhouse against the blue sky. She looked confused. "It's 2024, honey. October." "Close enough," I whispered. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Thomas's appendix had ruptured, but the surgeons saved him. The trial was a media sensation. The evidence on the hard drives was damning. Terabytes of footage and financial records showing they had made over $1.5 million selling subscriptions to voyeurs. They were convicted of child abuse, false imprisonment, and fraud. They were sentenced to 25 years each. Thomas and I were emancipated. We inherited the money. It felt dirty, but the lawyers said it was restitution. We sold the farm and burned the vintage clothes in a bonfire that lit up the night sky. It's been 4 years now. Thomas is studying computer science. He loves technology. He has a robotic vacuum cleaner that he talks to like a pet. I'm studying history. Real history. I want to know what actually happened, not the propaganda version. Living in the modern world is still hard. The choices in the supermarket paralyze me. The noise of the city makes me want to hide. But when that happens, I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I play heavy metal, or rap, or techno. Anything loud, chaotic, and undeniably modern. And I smile. Because the noise isn't the devil. The silence was.